Every spring, millions of college students pack their bags and head to the coast. It's a massive, synchronized migration driven by one simple desire: to completely disconnect from reality and leave every obligation behind. That sudden shift creates a unique psychological environment. When you drop thousands of young adults into an unfamiliar city, you get an intense cocktail of lowered inhibitions, disorientation, and extreme social trust. Everyone assumes everyone else is just there to have a good time. That assumption is dangerous. Criminals don't simply wander these beach towns hoping to stumble across a random opportunity. They actively construct physical and psychological environments to exploit those specific vulnerabilities. To separate a target from the safety of the herd, predators rely on three primary tactical pathways. They will weaponize your respect for authority, dangle a temptation, or use social engineering to trick you into walking into the cage yourself. By the time you realize you're in danger, the physical trap has usually already snapped shut. The only reliable way to survive is to recognize the anatomy of the lure before you lose the chance to walk away. 4 years ago, a group of college students opted out of the massive beach parties and rented an isolated cabin deep in the woods. Late that night, the silence was broken by loud knocking. A thin piece of locked wood was the only barrier keeping them safe. The voice on the other side belonged to a man claiming to be a park ranger. It was 4 in the morning, and he demanded they open the door for a mandatory welfare check. He was banking on the fact that if he projected the right aesthetic of authority, the victims would simply unlock the door for him. We are conditioned from childhood to comply with law enforcement. When someone demands access under the banner of official business, our brain's automatic response is obedience. That instinct often completely overrides our baseline survival mechanisms. Instead of turning the deadbolt, the students kept the door shut and engaged the man in conversation to stall him. While one kept him talking, another called the local police dispatch. They quickly learned no actual rangers were in the area. The man outside was a predator trying to talk his way in. When you are physically isolated, your compliance is the exact tool a predator needs to compromise your defenses. In those situations, refusing to open the door and relying on independent external verification is the safest move you can make. In 2016, a group of 40 students traveled to the dense, chaotic resort city of Acapulco. In a geography this vast, a traveler's safety feels guaranteed by the sheer volume of the crowd surrounding them. One student, Sahil, actively went looking for illicit substances. He found a local man and a supposed translator inside a crowded club. The men offered him a sample, and once he accepted, they told him they had to complete the transaction outside. He followed them out a side exit, completely disappearing from his protective network. The moment the heavy club doors closed behind him, the trap executed. A car was waiting. Sahil was shoved into the back seat, and as the vehicle sped away, the men beat him senseless and stripped him of everything valuable. During the drive, one of the assailants asked why there were so many Americans in town. Without thinking, Sahil casually mentioned he was traveling with a massive university group, all staying at the same resort. He accidentally introduced a massive liability into their equation. The risk of a giant search party outweighed his value as a target, prompting them to dump him on a random road. Being in a highly populated space offers zero protection if the strangers around you don't know who you are. Your safety is strictly tied to your visibility within your own group, which brings us to the most elaborate method of isolation. A group of students drove out to an enormous remote lake house in the Ozarks, expecting a massive party organized by affiliated Greek life chapters. Right at the front door, the trap's first mechanical step locked into place. The host delivered a rehearsed speech about the dangers of drunk driving on narrow lake roads and confiscated everyone's car keys, dropping them into a large bowl in the foyer. Inside, one of the students noticed something deeply wrong. The crowd wasn't a cohesive network. It was a collection of disjointed, small groups who didn't actually know each other. The few people who did seem familiar with one another were reciting nearly identical, clearly rehearsed backstories. The next morning, the student watched a couple say their goodbyes and supposedly drive home. But during a walk later that day, he found their exact car hidden behind a groundskeeping shed a quarter-mile down the road. They hadn't left. They were staging a public departure to maintain the illusion. He walked right up to the host in the middle of breakfast and demanded his keys. The host's friendly demeanor vanished. The entire room went dead silent. staring with open hostility as the student forced the host to retrieve his keys. They grabbed their bags and drove off. Weeks later, back on campus, they uncovered the reality of the trap. The friend who supposedly organized the trip had her phone stolen weeks prior. A complete stranger had used her digital identity to send out invitations, engineering a house full of isolated victims who trusted the source of the text message. The most effective predators don't need to lure you from the shadows. They use digital impersonation to turn your own social circles into the bait. Look closely at the cabin, the waiting car, and the lake house. None of these situations began with physical force. They were entirely built on a precise understanding of human social instincts and how to subvert them. A predator uses your predictable behaviors against you. Your automatic obedience to a uniform, your willingness to follow a stranger for a temptation, and your deep-seated fear of causing a scene are the actual mechanisms that lock you in the cage. We navigate the world using a social contract, an unspoken agreement to be polite, compliant, and accommodating. Criminals count on the fact that even when your gut tells you something is wrong, you will prioritize being polite over being safe. Escaping a meticulously planned trap requires you to intentionally shatter the social contract. You have to be willing to embrace extreme awkwardness, offend strangers, and demand your property back in a room full of hostile people. The physical defenses of a locked door or a crowded resort are secondary. Survival is determined by the courage to act on your paranoia and walk away before the trap is even set.